On April 4th, 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. was tragically shot by James Earl Ray outside of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. While the country went up in flames, there was a calming voice that arose from the ashes. That very same night, Robert F. Kennedy gave one of the greatest speeches by any American politician over the last 100 years.
I am announcing today my candidacy for the presidency of the United States.
After the announcement that he would run for President of the United States earlier that year, Bobby Kennedy had decided to go against the sitting president, Lyndon B. Johnson, to help lead the American people in a more progressive direction. On the night of April 4th, Bobby was on his way to a presidential campaign stop in one of the most dangerous parts of Indianapolis. Before leaving for the event, his press secretary Frank Mankiewicz had heard that King had been killed by a white man. Kennedy's political advisors wanted to immediately call off the event, citing that it was far too dangerous for the candidate to attend. Police officers even insisted that they would not provide any protection. Instead of following orders, Bobby left with a few of his staff members to deliver what's known as his most renowned address. In the car ride over, Kennedy drafted a statement that highlighted quotes from some of his favorite passages. By the time he arrived, the crowd had yet to hear about King's death, which led to Bobby having to break the news himself.
And I think sad news for all of our fellow citizens and people who love peace all over the world. And that is that Martin Luther King was shot and was killed tonight in Memphis.
Several screams and sobs were heard throughout the crowd as Bobby delivered the message. With his handwritten notes, he then expressed what made King such a powerful voice in both the black and white communities across the nation.
To love and to justice between fellow human beings. He died in the cause of that effort.
Dr. King was able to understand the two races and replace violence with compassion, just as Bobby had learned to do over the last few years. As Attorney General for John F. Kennedy's administration, Bobby was tough on crime and didn't take a sympathetic look to the civil rights movement until near the end of his brother's rule. By the time Bobby was campaigning for his own presidential nomination, he had changed his views on the world to become much more progressive. Jack's death signaled a change in Bobby's character. Once he got himself out of such a depressive state, Bobby began to realize just how important empathy was to others. Revealing this vulnerable side to people could show them a new level of understanding that they'd never seen from a politician before this moment. Bobby needed to experience a significant loss to truly understand what pain others were going through. At this point, the after effects of segregation were causing a division between white people and black people throughout the United States. Bobby could see the separation happening and knew the loss of King would only hurt even more. King being killed by a white man didn't seem to help matters either.
I would only say that I can also feel in my own heart the same kind of feeling. I had a member of my family killed, but he was killed by a white man.
Whenever he talked about Jack, Bobby would often use the term President Kennedy, as it distanced himself emotionally from the late politician. On multiple occasions, when Bobby did speak about Jack, his voice would crack, or he would break down in tears once he was out of the public eye. Regardless of how hard he tried, Bobby could never forget about what happened to Jack. Aeschylus was mentioned to show that sadly, we as a people will only gain insight about others through awful events like the ones that occurred that fateful night.
Even in our sleep, pain which cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart, until in our own despair, against our will, comes wisdom through the awful grace of God.
Greek philosophers were also mentioned as a way to connect the past to the present.
and what dedicate ourselves to what the Greeks wrote so many years ago, to tame the savageness of man and make gentle the life of this world.
Bobby wanted to show that for hundreds of years, we've been trying to learn how to become less violent. Preferably, we must grow to be more compassionate towards each other.
It is not the end of violence. It is not the end of lawlessness, and it's not the end of disorder. But the vast majority of white people and the vast majority of black people in this country want to live together, want to improve the quality of our life, and want justice for all human beings that abide in our land.
Bobby let it be known that this wasn't going to be the end of violence. Instead, what we have to do is continuously work together to improve the relationships between races in the United States. Despite being less than 6 minutes in length, this speech voiced Bobby's concerns for the entire nation. Losing such an influential leader for the civil rights movement meant that he was going to have to work even harder to give minorities a platform they could trust was going to fight for them. 2 months after the speech was given, Kennedy himself met the same fate as two of America's other great leaders of change. A gunshot to the back of the head after his last public address at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles, California, is how Bobby left the world. The speech after Martin Luther King's assassination is one that we should remember Bobby Kennedy by. It still lives on in history books and documentaries. It even has a place on the stone wall that faces Bobby's grave at Arlington National Cemetery in Virginia.
What we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence and lawlessness, but is love and wisdom and compassion toward one another.
This speech showed that one man can still make a difference, even when they face challenges in their lives. Over 100 cities across the United States turned to violence that fateful night.
Let us dedicate ourselves to that and say a prayer for our country and for our people. Thank you very much.
But because of Bobby Kennedy, Indianapolis was not one of them.
What has violence ever accomplished? What has it ever created?